Hey, hi everyone. Am I audible and is my screen visible?
Yes, your screen is visible. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, let me get started. Really sorry, somehow Zoom crashed my whole system. Yeah, let me get started. Okay, so thank you for the kind introduction. Hi everyone, I'm Mohit Jain, and today I have two talks, and these are the two core areas in which I work in. One is in low-cost smartphone-based diagnostic solution, and the other is expert in the loop chatbots. Both are in healthcare domain, and I'll talk this now, and the other talk is at 2 o'clock. Just before I start, feel free to interrupt me. I'm not able to see you guys, but just ask a question anytime in between, and I'll be more than happy to pause. And so, because I want to keep it more conversational and more discussion oriented as well. Okay, so let's get started. Uh, okay. As we all know, healthcare is not accessible to a huge population across the globe, especially in India. And this is because of a variety of reasons. One is that there is a skewed doctor to patient ratio. There is also a lot of unskilled and semi-skilled healthcare workers. There is also usually a long wait time and a long commute time to see a doctor, which also results in a loss of income for, let's say, someone who is a daily wage earner. Okay. Um, so hence, our aim is to democratize healthcare. And by that, we mean is to develop low-cost smartphone-based diagnostic solutions with AI assistants embedded in them to enable community health workers, teachers, primary clinicians, or even a Swiggy or Amazon delivery personnel to perform preliminary screening with minimal amount of training. Okay. And to achieve this vision, over the past almost 5.5, 6 years now, I've been working towards developing a variety of diagnostic tools from keratoconus diagnosis to blood pressure estimation, all using a smartphone. Okay. All of these works have happened with close collaboration with researchers at Microsoft, as well as doctors and ophthalmologists and medical staff of Sankrai hospitals and either other NGOs like Welt Hunger Hilfe and Khushi Baby and others. Okay. So what I'll do here is that I will quickly run through like some of these projects with just like a one slidey, and then I'll deep dive into the first project, which is the keratoconus detection using a smartphone. Okay, and there I will spend bulk of my talk because there it is like almost an ongoing project for the last 5 years, and we have achieved multiple milestone in that. So it will also like help us to reflect like what all work and effort is needed to do this flavor of work or this kind of work. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, um, I'll also like, yeah, to keep it, I may prepare the talk so that I can give it to a live audience, but because of yesterday's disaster, decided not to come. But yeah, so I'll pause and ask you a few questions, and feel free to like, yeah, raise hand and give a response, and like, yeah, maybe Nipun or somebody can be moderator there too, so that they can say like which one or who can answer. Okay, so let's start with this simple but fun exercise. Okay, so this is a work that we started doing with Sankrai Hospital. So there is a eye condition called as dry eye. Okay, and in that your eye becomes dry, so your eye needs to be moist in nature, it becomes dry. And so we found that like, oh, if you actually look at the eye using by like reflecting some or like putting some light over it or shine some light over it, you see something. Whenever you blink, something happens in your eye. So can you tell me like what's the difference between this normal eye and the dry eye here? Anybody from the audience? Is my question clear? No. Anybody from the audience, can you tell me like what's the difference that you're seeing between the two eyes, the left eye, which is a normal eye, and the right eye, which is a dry eye? Uh,
Yes, sir. Around the pupil, there is a much more redness in the dry eye rather than the normal eye.
Around there is a redness in the dry. Like you're saying this part is more red?
Yeah, both of.
Ah, okay. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. But that's not what I was looking for. Something more obvious. Uh, So this is the sclera region you're saying is more red here. Okay. Somebody else?
Uh,
Am I audible? I think the reflection is much more better in the normal eye than the dry eye, or the curvature is something related to that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, reflection definitely is better, but I think the okay, maybe it's not very clear in the video, but if I play the video, can somebody maybe then becomes more clear. So this is the I'm playing the video. So can you see something that's happening here? Oh, and this is the other video. So now can somebody tell me what's the difference?
Sir, in the left side of the eyes is some pattern, and the right one is a no pattern.
So what is that pattern?
Sir, some patches like
And why is that happening? Can anybody guess that? Like very basic science. So why is that it looks like this? Oops.
the
Okay.
due reflection.
Sorry?
The due to reflection.
Reflection. Okay. So let me tell you. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's partly right. Okay. It's not exactly reflection. So what happens is that like your eye comprises of a layer of like almost like your so whenever you blink, so here what happens is that like they are actually blinking. So you can see there is a blink that happens. And whenever after the blink you open your eyes, of tear film actually forms over the surface of your eye. Okay. And that tear, so whenever you blink, so there is a film of tear which forms on the surface of the eye. And that tear film comprises of three layers. Okay. So, and the biggest layer, like almost 80 to 85% of the layer is the aqueous layer, which is just the water layer. But above that water layer, there is actually a oil layer, like a layer of oil over it, okay, which is called as lipid layer. So lipid is basically just oil film, and because of that oil, it doesn't allow water to evaporate from the eye. So it doesn't. So if there is a thick enough lipid layer, okay, the water won't evaporate. Okay. Now, as a kid, you might must have seen that if you have like a pool of water and you put some oil over it, then you can see like the reflection of light and like making these very like interesting colors. So over here also you can see that like very much like flow of the ocean. So it is like this is the oil layer which is actually moving up. Okay. And if you have a thick enough oil layer, then you can actually see the reflection of all of these colorful lights here. So yeah, it becomes like mostly like that bluish and reddish and orangish tint of color that you can see here. However, if it is a dry eye where the layer of oil is very thin, then you don't see much color. You only see like white and gray here. Okay. Uh, so we try to exploit this principle that uh, a healthy eye uh, or a normal eye will have a lot of color that's being reflected because there is a layer of oil over water. And so whenever you are blinking, these kind of waves get formed. While in a dry eye, it won't get formed. So we use that and we use like this kind of like a two phone setup. There's a phone at the bottom, which is actually causing this kind of area getting highlighted on the eye, basically like just a small window of the eye. And then there is a phone at the top which records a video of the eye. Okay. And then we do some video processing to identify whether an eye is a dry eye or a healthy eye. Okay. So, so that's like, I'm just like trying to like make you aware that like simple things that you may have learned and learned in the past can be used to come up with these interesting solutions. Okay. Uh, there's another kind of work that we did, which was some majority of you would have glasses, and when you go to a doctor, they use such a device, which is called as a retinoscope. Okay, and retinoscope is a device where they move the retinoscope from right to left. Okay, and what happens is that the light from the retinoscope gets reflected from the retina of the eye. Okay, and it contains information about the refractive error. Okay, so when you move the telescope left to right, the reflection should actually move either in the same direction or opposite direction, depending on whether you have positive power or negative power. So reflection, I mean, is a small thing that you see here, reflection of this on the eye. And yeah, so I think keeping it short. So yeah, so we use that. So again, we actually put up a retinoscope over a smartphone, captured video of this retinoscope movement from left to right and right to left, had an image processing algorithm to identify the refractive error in the eye, like what number of the power glass that should be given to an individual, like all the spherical error and cylindrical error and the axis of the error. Okay. Um, so moving on, and we also worked on proposing a bunch of deep learning solutions for a variety of health problems. For example, we trained an end-to-end DL network here called as RespireNet to classify crackle and wheeze lung sound. And we were able to get SOTA results. We also proposed a CNN-based architecture to estimate height of children under the age of 5 years from depth images. And finally, we also are working to figure out a way of estimating blood pressure just by putting your finger to cover the camera of the smartphone. Okay, so these are like a bunch of other projects. Uh, so let's deep dive into the one that I'm the most excited about. Okay, and here I've kept the title as Smart KC Past, Present, and Future, and it will be clear that like why I've kept this as we go along. Okay, so what is Smart KC? Smart KC is a smartphone-based corneal topographer that is used for diagnosing a disease called as keratoconus. So anybody in the audience know what is keratoconus, or may have experienced or yep suffered from it in the past? Okay. I think let me go over. This is a work which has been done in collaboration with doctors at the Sankrai Hospital, along with two researchers at Microsoft, me and Nipun Quatra. Okay, so keratoconus is a disease which mainly impacts the cornea of the eye. So healthy or a typical cornea is usually dome shaped. Okay, and and as you can see here in the image, however, a person who is suffering from keratoconus has a cornea which is bulging outward into an irregular conical in shape. So that's why the keratoconus, kerato means cornea, and conus means it becomes more of a conical in shape. Okay. In the worst part is that keratoconus impacts teenagers in the age group of 10 to 25 years. That is mostly people in the audience. And it is the leading cause of blindness in that age group in India. So worldwide, the impact of keratoconus is not high. It is usually 0.5% people suffer from it. But in India, it impacts 2.3% people, which is a fairly high number. And that is mainly because of the genetic reason. Like Indian corneas are usually thinner and steeper to begin with. And also because of the hot and dry weather in India, it results in a lot of irritation and which results in a lot of eye rubbing, and that can impact the shape of the cornea. Okay. Uh, there are different ways to treat this disease. The simplest, if it is detected early, you can just treat it by putting a contact lens, which actually gives the shape of the cornea and held it in place. At moderate level, there is surgery called as corneal cross-linking that is being used. But if it is at an advanced stage, corneal transplant is the only option. So worldwide, 27% of the corneal transplant happens to treat the keratoconus disease. Okay. So what we learn is that early diagnosis is the key here. And diagnosis of keratoconus is not super hard because traditionally, like almost like let's say 50 years or 80 years back, when there were no medical devices, it used to be diagnosed using this simple paper cutout. Okay. Uh, and the main idea here is that you need to estimate the shape of the cornea. And for that, there is a disc. So this thing that is held by a healthcare worker in her hand, it's called as a Placido disc. And it is very simple. It is just a series of concentric black and white rings as you can see in the image here. Okay. And when somebody is looking from the center here, where there is a hole, okay, when somebody is looking from the center to a person's eye, what will they see? Can somebody tell me? Audience again. If you look at this from this Placido image, center to someone's eye, what will you look? What the eye will look?
Well, so in nano case, there will be a perfect concentric image of the placido disc formed in the on the surface of cornea. But in case of keratoconus, the image will be distorted, as far as I know.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. Yes, exactly. So what will happen is that because they are looking, so the eye is like very much like a mirror. It reflects everything that sees. So there will be a pattern of this concentric black and white pattern that will form over the eye. Okay, and we call that as Myers. And in case of what you exactly said, in case of a normal eye, the projected Myers will be circular and evenly spaced, which indicates it's the normal eye. But in case of a keratoconus eye, a distorted cornea is there, and hence it will result in a distorted pattern of Myers. Okay, indicating it is a keratoconus eye. Okay. And this paper-based Placido disc are fairly cheap. It requires an expert doctor, as using it is very challenging and requires a lot of training. And also, it is not highly accurate. So, because keratoconus is a progressive disease, so the early you catch it, the quicker you treat it. But with this, it is very hard to catch it at an early stage. So, the current clinical gold standard is a device called as corneal topographer. Okay. And these devices rely on the exact same principle, but have a background lighting, as you can see here. So there is a series of LED lights at the background, and then there is a Placido over it, and there are like too many rings. So you can see that like the number of rings is like almost like 18 or 20 rings here compared to this one, which has like only like 3 or 4 rings. So, so what, uh, so what this helps in actually getting a very high quality image of the projected mire on the eye. But these devices are fairly big. They're not portable. They're very expensive. Like each of them cost around $10,000 to $20,000. However, they do not require a doctor. Any medical staff at the hospital can use it. Even you guys can use it if you take like a half an hour training of how to use such a device. And these devices are highly accurate. Okay, so that's why these are the clinical gold standard. But the output they give looks like something like this. Like these are the two different eyes you can see on the left and right. And can you tell me maybe just shout like yeah, whether the left eye is keratoconus or the right eye is keratoconus? What do you guys feel? People in left eye keratoconus, raise your hand who thinks that the left eye has keratoconus. I'm looking at you. And people who think the right eye has keratoconus. Okay, a few hands. Okay. So yeah, so even with this, it's not trivial to actually identify. So in this case, actually this one, the first eye is has keratoconus. So what this device does is that like it captures these images and then it outputs a topography heat map. Okay, wherein it shows that like what is the curvature at each point on the eye. And here you can see that if like the more red means it is more steeper, and hence it is more conical in nature, and hence the left eye is actually the one which, or the first eye is the one which has keratoconus. The other eye is a healthy eye. Okay, so I'm just with this I'm trying to make you understand that the initial solution, like this solution, is a very hard solution even for doctors. This one is also hard for doctors if they don't give out a topography heat map. So at the end of the day, the doctors look at the topography heat map along with those few values called as SIM K1, SIM K2 values, which are the steepest point on the cornea and the flattest point on the cornea. So they look at these points to identify whether a patient has keratoconus or not. Okay. So moving on, our goal in this project was to develop a low-cost portable corneal topographer which can capture the Meyer image accurately and output a curvature heat map. Okay, so that was the goal. And to achieve that, there were 3 parts of the project. First is to actually create a device which can capture which can actually project the Placido and form the Meyer. The second was to have an app which can capture the Meyer images accurately. And third was once we have the images, can we convert it into a curvature heat map? Okay, so these were the 3 components. I'll dive deep into each of them. So the first is Placido disk, as I told you. So we started with like we 3D printed various shapes of Placido disk and tried out different numbers and colors of LED lights for projecting the Meyer. After a bunch of trial and error, we finalized this particular device design, which is here at the top and or here as well. And so here you can see that like there is a Placido disk which is used for projection, and there is a LED light panel. So there are 10 LED lights here in this particular blue color, because again, color also play a critical role here. Okay. And inside the exterior cover, it actually is like this. So you can see here there is a gap, like a bigger gap, which is the thing which is closer to the camera, and the smaller gap when the thing which is closer to the eye. Okay. So we built such a what do you say, like a attachment to project the light on the eye. Okay. Uh, so here is a small video showing how it actually looks. So this was the very first prototype, which is almost like a 5-year-old video now. So you can see that like the whole LED light was getting powered just from the smartphone. So there is no other electronics here. So we just like got this eye from Amazon and do that. The second was that if you see that I am putting something here. So this is actually just a butter paper that we use for baking and stuff. So I rolled it up to put it here so that the light can get diffused and does not blind the person, because LED lights are fairly bright. So you don't want to directly hit the eye. So you want some diffuser. And just like if you fold the butter paper a few times, it acts as a translucent paper, a good source of diffusing the light. Okay. So we put that here. And now we design it in such a manner that these two are separate components. But the three legs can fit these three holes. And just with a twist mechanism, we can lock it in place. Okay. So that's it. So now this is locked. And once again, if you switch on the lights, so this is how it looks from the inside. Okay. And this is like a very cheap attachment that we built. This costs like some 2,000 rupees and only weighs 140 grams. Okay. Moving on. So now we have a good attachment to project the Placido disk on the eye and to get Myers. But once we started collecting data, what we realized was that like a majority of the data points were inaccurate. And the reason what we identified was that there are two reasons for it. One is that because in a typical uh, corneal topographer, a medical grade corneal topographer, there is a headrest and a chin rest. So hence your head and eye are very, very parallel to the ground, and you are looking straight into the camera. However, in our case, because it is a portable device and the staff may be standing above the patient, so in that case, their head may be up and the axis of the camera and the axis of the eye may not align with each other. And that can result in either an offset, like they are misaligned, or it can also result in a tilt. And either of these two results in a really poor output. Okay. And the error is actually, so these are very sensitive errors. Like even a few mm's, let's say like 5 can result in 15% error. Okay. So what we did was that we added an AIS. So we created a smart KC application to capture the image, and we added real-time on-device image processing on it, which assists the operator, like the person who is collecting the image, to automatically capture very high quality images. So what it does is that as you can see here, so the main thing it is actually looking for is when the eye and the camera are in alignment. And as soon as that happens, it checks for whether the image is sharp, it has proper exposure, and it is bright. And it automatically, when all of these conditions are satisfied, it captures three such images. So here you can see this is the quality of image we are able to capture. Okay. Uh, Now moving on, so now we have a high quality Meyer image. So now we have a heat map generation pipeline wherein we input the Meyer image, and it goes through a bunch of steps. Like the first one is actually image enhancement, where we use a fingerprint algorithm to convert the Meyer image into this black and white image. Looks pretty much like a thresholding, but does a bunch of more things than that. Then we do the Meyer detection. We have a method called as arc step method. So this is like a 50-year-old method to convert a 2D set of Meyer points into a 3D reconstruction. And then after that, we put a Zernick based curve fitting over it. Okay, so that now it becomes like more of how a cornea should look like. Once we have this 3D image, we can get different kind of corneal topography heat maps. So there is something called as an axial map, and there's something called as tangential map. So all of those heat maps we can get once we have this 3D image. Okay, so this is so keep in mind that all of this till now, everything is traditional image processing and mathematics and optics. There is no deep learning involved. Okay. So, so hence we do not require any amount of data to train any kind of model. So there is no model here. Okay. And you will, I think this is an important point that like in healthcare scenario, because we don't have a lot of data to begin with in many of the cases. So the traditional methods actually come in very handy. So it's important to learn those. Okay. There is something else on working distance error, which I'll just skip for the time being. Yeah, this is a. Now, what happened after all of this was that we already have a device in place and we wanted to evaluate it. So we deployed it at the Sankrai hospital, collected data from 57 patients and basically 101 eyes. One third of the eye had keratoconus. And what we did was that we asked for all of these 101 eyes, we actually got the heat map generated from our device, which is Smart KC, and from a medical grade topographer. In this case, it's called as Keratron. Okay. And we showed the doctor these heat map and asked it, like, tell us whether it is a keratoconus patient, non-keratoconus patient, or they are not able to make up their mind, and ask it to retake that image. Okay. And qualitatively, the results look like this. So the Keratron image, which is where like the first half, you can see that like all of these are heat map generated from the medical device and even the placebo image. However, the Smart KC placebo image looks a bit different. And even the heat map, I think, is a bit different, but they capture the essence of the heat map. Uh, so it is fairly good in that sense. Um, and when we actually asked the doctor to identify the images or the heat maps from each of the device, we found that Smart KC was able to achieve a very high specificity and sensitivity. So almost 94% across the four doctors sensitivity and 100% specificity. In contrast, the medical grade device was highly sensitive. It was 100% sensitive. However, the specificity was much lower. So there were a lot of cases when people who didn't have keratoconus were being identified as people with keratoconus. Okay, so the false positive rate was fairly high, and that was mainly because of one reason is that these devices does not work well for deep socket eye. So whenever there is a big difference between your eye and the camera, so when you are like you have a deep socket eye, so in those cases we found these devices to fail, the medical device to fail. However, our device was able to make that work because we used some image processing algorithm to identify the distance between the eye and the camera. So that is called as the working distance. And hence our specificity was also very high. Okay. Any questions so far? I've yeah, covered a bunch of things. So
Sir, I have one question.
please go ahead.
So as of now, sir, we have variety of cameras, smartphone in the positioning type. So how can you handle that type of problem?
Come again, sorry, I couldn't get your question.
Sir, as of now, we have a variety of camera positioning on the smartphone, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Variety of camera positioning or the quality of camera, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Positioning. So positioning is very easy. We just need to have so the way this works is that like the hole here, you can see the hole here. This should align directly with the camera. Okay. And we have this kind of like a paper clip kind of attachment. So if you look closely, let me go back here. Okay. I think it's not visible. Yeah, this visible here. Can you see on this image on the bottom right? So there is a paper clip here, basically. So it is like a clip. You can attach it and you can move it closer to where the camera is. So you need to align it properly. Okay. And then it works. That's it. Okay. So the positioning of the camera doesn't matter to us. The quality of the camera also doesn't matter because again, like different, that's a very good question. So every smartphone has a different camera with a different like focus distance and focal length and the resolution. So what we do is that we ask, and all of this source code is open source, by the way. Everything is on GitHub. So we ask like three camera parameter. What is the size of the sensor of the camera, and uh, what is the focal distance of the camera? So we just input these parameters in our system, and everything gets converted into our baseline, okay, or what the number that we are using. The camera requirement is that it has to be above 12 megapixel, which is pretty much every other camera these days. And the minimum focusing distance should be more than 75 mm because the length of this Placido disc is 75 mm. Okay, so the Placido length is 75 mm. So the minimum focusing distance should be less than that. Okay, else it won't be able to focus on the eye. I think those are the only two requirements. And with respect to the data, we need the sensor size and the focal length. Okay, and with that, our system makes it work. Any other question?
Sir, as you said, there is no deep learning model, so we are just relying on so we still need a health professional to have this model, and the old one topographer, which was just the cost. So the cost is reduced, but the method is almost same. At the end, we still need the health professional, right?
Sorry, your voice was breaking badly. Can you or somebody else repeat the question?
Um, Okay. I said that there's no legal model. So at the so professional is not right.
Again, I can't hear you.
Hello,
Yeah.
am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, sir. I was asking that there's no legal model, as you said, and so we are completely relying on the heat map generated.
Yes.
Okay, so at the end we still need the health professional.
Yes. So we are just trying to make a medical device, uh, which means okay. I'll give you two answers there. Yeah, we are trying to create a medical device which can replace a very expensive medical device. Okay, and so the data can be collected. So let's say, like in this case, let's say somebody, a health worker or a school teacher, can collect data from all the children in the class, and and then the heat maps can be shared with the doctor who can very quickly, like within 10 seconds, they can say whether this is a keratoconus kid or not, just looking at the heat map. Okay, so that's fairly trivial for them. So we don't want to replace the doctor. We just want to give or make the medical device more accessible. So the motive is to do that. Okay, so that's the first answer. The second answer is that we also have another paper wherein we trained a model which can take these heat map and can do automatically classify whether it is a keratoconus or non-keratoconus. Okay, so we have a small DL end-to-end network, works as a black box, and it does a decent job. It gives you with a high accuracy of 90-95%, something like that. Okay, so that's a EMBC paper. So we also did that, and but I think more doctors want to rely directly on the heat map rather than on the final outcome, because that's what they are used to. Okay, even the current system that they are using, they rely on the heat maps. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm. Um, okay, let me move on. But again, feel free to interrupt me. Okay. So now we have this kind of so what next? So this all happened like around 2.5, maybe 3 years back, when we have this kind of result and we published a paper and it was all good. And that's where most of the research usually stops. Okay. So most of the research work, like you build something cool, you write a paper and then you move on to the next big thing. But in this case, what happened was that, like, as soon as we like wrote the paper, and this paper was in UBCom, which is a computer science journal, we started receiving emails from around the world. Let's say, like, we received email from Stanford, from Duke, from Utah, from UCSF, from asking us to collaborate or give them this medical device for them to do more and more clinical trials with it. We also received emails from ophthalmologists across the world, from like Morocco, France, even like Africa and Bangladesh, Pakistan, like, because they also wanted access to this device. We also received again emails from the research orgs in India, including LVPEI, which is among the biggest eye research institute in India, and even the Narayana Nethralaya here in Bangalore, so that we asking to collaborate and to maybe build it further. But the best thing that happened was that we also received emails from these device manufacturer. So Remedio is a device manufacturer, ophthalmology device manufacturer based out of Bangalore. Glaucos is a New York Stock Exchange listed company who actually makes the surgical tools for doing the corneal cross-linking surgery. So that is the only FDA approved company to make the devices for conducting the surgery to fix keratoconus. Okay, and a bunch of others. Okay, and then we saw so much of interest. So what we did was that, because Microsoft is not into device manufacturing, but we really wanted to help the community, so we open sourced everything. We open sourced the 3D printed attachment. We open sourced the design of the attachment, the app, as well as the image processing pipeline. And with the disclaimer that, like, yeah, this is still a research project, but you can use it, you can build over it. So this is under the MIT license, so you can do pretty much whatever you want to do with it. And we also became like thought leader in the space. Anybody who reached out to us asking how they can use it, use the code, or do something with it, we will help them out. Okay. Uh, so over a period of the next 3 years, or in the last 3 years, what happened was this: the Remedio, which was a company based out of Bangalore, they actually converted that device, our crude prototype, into a medical device. Okay, so their device is called as Insta KC, and this is their initial prototype, and they kept on improving it. They moved it from Android to iPhone, and they did add like a bunch of bells and whistles to it. You can see that there is actually like a small head support here, so that you know, like, how far it is from the eye. So there is some more support to the phone as well. So they did a bunch of things, and now around 6 weeks back, they actually launched the device in public. So if you can see this, so this is how the medical device looks like, and they have comes with iPhone integrated with it. This is the world's first smartphone based corneal topographer. Okay, and yeah, and they received all the regulatory approvals from India, so it has been launched in India now. It's also on their website, so anybody can buy it and use it. Okay, so I think so that's what I think like a big journey happened. And in the journey, a few other things also happened. So, for example, I'll talk about this Smart KC++. So, we improved the performance of this smartphone-based corneal topographer. So, in our initial study, we found that you can see that like we collected data from 57 patients. So, that should ideally be 114 eyes, but we only use 101 eyes. So, 13 eyes we completely discarded because the image quality was not good, or our image processing pipeline completely failed on that. But so then we worked to actually improve the pipeline, and we found like there are like three errors in the pipeline. Okay. But then before I go on, any question? Yeah, I should pause in between. No? Okay. So one of the major errors that we found was that like this segmentation actually failed badly. So you can see that like there is like instead of one Meyer, like there are two Meyers which are getting formed here with a gap in between. Okay. So it started with one Meyer, but then they split into two Meyer, then again came into one Meyer. Okay. So the Meyer segmentation was at fault. Second was that like due to the Meyer segmentation fault, the Meyer localization also was flawed for some cases, not for all cases, but let's say like for 15-20% of the cases. So here you can see that like in this case, you can see that like the red Meyer is actually overlapping, and then the blue Meyer here is actually continuing here with the blue here. Okay, so this is again like a major flaw in the system. Okay, and because of this, the arc step method was also failing badly. Okay, and with a bad arc step, like you can see, like ideally the gold standard was giving a heat map which looks like this at the top. Our actual heat map was looking something like this, which was pretty bad. Okay, so hence in those cases we completely discarded those images. But in this work, what we did was that we actually added three fixes to our system. So we moved from a traditional image processing to this deep learning based image processing. So first is that we used a unit based Meyer segmentation here. So in the old model, this was the heat map this was the Meyer image that we got. And in the new system, this is a new Meyer image. And you can see that like this one is way more accurate than the top one. Okay. Uh, and the main limitation of our initial system was that we assumed Myers to be circular. But as we know that because it is keratoconus patient and their Myers won't be circular, and that result into underestimation in severe cases and result in the Meyer not being formed at all. Okay, so we trained a unit model using the data that we achieved, using the pseudo labels of the existing algorithm that we had. So this was the interesting thing. I'll go like maybe say a few more words here. So for this unit, we actually use the output of the traditional image processing algorithm. Okay, so we use that to actually use that as a pseudo label for the input image. And with that, we actually trained a unit model, and it was able to fix most of the errors. Okay, so that was the step one done. The second was that we wanted to get a Meyer localization right. So in the initial method, like in the first, when I was telling you, we use something called a radial scanning algorithm, wherein from the center of this image, we will just like shoot like 360 rays for every degree. And we see that like when they are actually going from black to white or white to black. And we just use that to identify the Meyer. And but that also has the limitation that we assume the Myers are always complete, which was not the case if it's a broken Meyer segment. Okay. So now what we did was that we actually used some kind of a clustering algorithm to see that like which are the neighborhood points which should be clubbed together to form a Meyer. Okay. So the spatial information along with clustering was used to identify these broken segments and correct the Meyer shift. So there is a Meyer shift which has happened here, but we were able to fix it using this clustering algorithm. Okay. But you can see here that many of the times that the Meyer is incomplete. You can see that it's not complete. So, and the arc step method does not take the standard arc step method, which is like some 50-year-old method, does not take incomplete Meyers. So we actually modified the arc step method to make sure that even like the missing Meyers are being used and able to make a proper topography heat map. Okay. So that was the third major thing. And with that, you can see that like where, so the smart KC is the first one, the last one is the smart KC plus plus, and the middle one is the Keratron. So you can see that like cases where actually the smart KC failed, the smart KC plus plus was able to make it work. Okay. So that was like, so again, like the project stopped at some point, but then we kept on adding or improving it. Okay. So, and these are like even the like numerical values also improved with this. Okay. And this was like a much bigger study with 303 eyes. So the first study was with 101 eyes. So this was with 303 eyes, and we were able to achieve very high accuracy numbers here. Okay. And I think that's it. Yeah, somebody asked that question. So there's also a method to automatically classify whether there is keratoconus or not, just using the SIMK value. Very simple, no AI, no ML, nothing. Like just with a standard rule that if the SIMK1 value is greater than 44 and the K1 minus K2 is greater than this, then it is keratoconus. And even with such a simple rule, we were able to achieve accuracy of almost 90%. Okay. But yeah, but the DL based method can achieve like around 95%. So we did that. Moving on, any question for the Smart KC++ work? Okay, let me move on. Okay, so now we have a system where we built, it got productized, we improved the performance of the system. Now we started thinking like what could be other use cases of such a system, because we already have attachment on the phone. Can that be used for something else? And the one thing that came to our mind was initially what I told you was the dry eye disease. Okay, so the dry eye disease was one method which I said very early in the talk, but that is not a gold standard. The color thing was something which is very new, and very few devices are using that approach. The gold standard way of identifying dryness in the eye is called as a tear breakup time. Okay, so this method is called as T-but. And what happened is that the standard approach of doing a TBIT is that like the ophthalmologist put a eye drop in your eye, and then they see your eye use, so it's a fluorescein eye drop. Okay, and then they see your eyes through a particular color, so that they can, whenever you blink and the tear film when it form, so whenever you blink a tear film gets formed, but after a few seconds the tear film break, and from the fluorescence they can actually identify the break, when the break happens. And they actually use a stopwatch to count like how many seconds have passed. If the tear film break after 10 seconds, that means you have a healthy eye. If it breaks before 10 seconds or 8 seconds, it means you have a dry eye. Okay. So that is the standard method. What we did in our work was that because we have this reflection over the surface of the eye, we can actually identify the tear breakup just from this Meyer video. Okay. So here, let's say like this, we capture the Meyer video. You can see here that a small break happens in the video automatically after a few seconds. You can see here. And that is actually indicative that the mire has broken now, which is basically the tear broke up now. Okay. And that is the time. So the first time you can see a breakup in the mire, that is the T-but time. And with that, we can identify dryness in the eye. So in this method, we did like, again, because there's a research work, so we identified like different kind of breaks which happen. So there's a break which we call as line break. There is a merge break where two of the mire got merged with one another. There is some out of shape where it's not broken completely, and then it completely got distorted. So it's like severe break happened across the eye. Okay. And we again like trained like a video processing pipeline, or had a full video processing pipeline to identify the time when the first break happened. Okay. And yeah, so we did like, it's a fairly complex thing. So we did that, and we were able to achieve a very high accuracy on detecting. So you can see that the current medical devices, so these are the first three are from current medical devices, where our approach got like around 80% precision and sensitivity. Okay. Uh, so that's it. So now, like, so with the same attachment, the same device, but just with a change in software, we are able to identify or classify or diagnose another disease, which is the dry eye. Okay. Now, finally, what is the ongoing work? So this is like the past was the initial medical device. The present was this, like these two work, which is the dry eye detection and the smart KC++ algorithm. The future, what we are still working on is to detect very early cases of keratoconus. Okay. So what, as of now, whatever I told you is from the outer surface of the cornea which is visible to the world. But the disease actually impacts the inner surface first. Okay. And that is called as the uh, that is called as the posterior surface of the cornea. So here you can see the green one is actually the posterior surface. So the bulging or the shape shift starts happening in the posterior surface first, and later it gets to the anterior, which is the outside surface of the cornea. Okay, and hence the current gold standard device, or like the current, I would say, trending device, are the device which is called as corneal tomographer, not topographer, tomographer, because it's capture individual cross sections of the cornea. So in this, what happens is that, like you can see, this is the device on the right hand side, and the red color camera actually rotates, and the camera here rotates while you have to keep looking at the center here. And what it does is that, like, it actually captures like the different cross section of the cornea. Okay, and then it combines all of these images or the videos, okay, together to form a 3D reconstruction of the cornea to give out something called as a pachymetry map. So this is the output it gives you. It gives you like, oh, the green, which is the inside surface of the eye, as well as the red, which is the outer surface of the eye. And the pachymetry heat map is the right hand side, where it gives you the thickness of the eye at each point. So so if there is if the eye is actually thicker, like the cornea is thicker here on the side, but very thin at the center. So that is also one way to identify that you have very early stage keratoconus. Okay, so it does that. Now we are actually working very actively to build something that can mimic such a corneal tomographer on a small smartphone based or handheld based device. Okay, so this is like way more complex than our initial work, because this relies on something called a Sound principle. The Sound is a principle like whenever you are capturing an image, only the central part of the image gets highlighted, or some part of the image gets highlighted, while everything else is blurred out. But using the Sound principle, you can actually you can do something wherein the subject plane, lens plane, and the image plane all intersect with each other. And at that point, the whole plane is on focus. So here you can see that this whole train from start to end is completely on focus, because it is actually falling on the Somflog intersection. Okay. So, and what it requires is that it requires that the lens plane, basically the camera and the lens, they need to be at an angle. Right now in your phone camera, they are just they are parallel to each other. Okay, the camera and the lens. But if they are at an angle, then we can actually do some tricky thing here. Okay, so that's what we are trying to do. We've actually used like it's a very new work. Only like for the last 3-4 months we are working on it. So we have used like a Raspberry Pi camera, along with this small 3D printed attachment, wherein it actually tilts. So it's what we call it like a tilt attachment. So it tilts so that the camera and the lens plane are at a particular angle, something like this. Okay. And now we are trying to capture this kind of a grid to see that if can actually capture the whole grid without with proper or like without any distortion or blurring. Okay. And then with that, we also try to capture the eye image. So you can see that the eye image is not very clean right now. We are working on it, but that's our current approach, and that's what we are experimenting. Okay. Any questions so far? Yeah. Okay. Moving on, just to conclude, I think, well, just conclude here is that so diagnostic device related research, the kind of research which I showed you for smart KC, these are highly, highly complex and requires a lot of time. Like even the first smart case, it took us almost like 2.5 year worth of effort just to get one research paper and one prototype in place, which was working reasonably well. Okay. However, and like the whole device, like medical device, is almost like 6 years project now, like when the Insta KC got released. Okay. So, but overall, all this work is highly, highly rewarding and can be very impactful. Okay. Interdisciplinary collaboration is very critical for success of such project. For example, in this case, we work very closely with the doctors at the Sankrai Hospital, and they taught us a lot of interesting insights about how exactly a traditional corneal topographer works, what a doctor sees in it, and what they are looking for in a portable device. Okay, so all of those are very important information for us to learn and use it in our research work. Other thing that you need to learn is that, like, yeah, one research thread, if you do it well, it can branch out into multiple new research opportunities. For example, from Smart KC, we did the classification, and then we did the improvement on the software Smart KC++. Then we did the dry eye detection. Now we are doing this. It's just part of the same thread, but you can do a lot of things once you like go deep in one thread. Okay. And the final is that, like, yeah, real world deployment is very, very crucial to provide a lot of not only like insight about the accuracy, but also like insight about the usability of the system, like how exactly operator will hold the device, how where the patient will be sitting, how they will capture the image, and then you like do a lot of fixes to make sure that it can work in a real world environment. Okay, and that's it. Yeah, thank you everyone. I think we have almost like in half an hour left, so feel free to ask me any question that you may have. If not, then we can just like yeah resume after the lunch break. Yeah.
With that one and one broad question. So when you
Mhm.
start with such kind of work, is it that you yourself come up with some set of techniques and then approach the doctors, or is it first you approach the doctors and figure out what are the kinds they're looking for, kind of problems they're trying to solve? So how does such kind of a collaboration typically start and continue?
Good question. Yes, yes. Yeah. So this actually the smart KC work was something that we came up with and went to doctors, and then we like worked with them. So that's how it started. But over the past 6 years, we have become like very, I think, uh, have built up like a very strong relationship with the set of doctors. So now, anytime they have any kind of research that they want to work on, they reach out to us. They say that like, oh, we have this data set, or we want to build this device in a low cost manner. Can we brainstorm on that? So the whole retinoscopy work that I briefly talked about, that was actually one of the doctors coming to back to us saying that like, oh, like even training students how to use retinoscope is very hard because there is no video that gets recorded and they can't see it later, and hence we don't know what they are focusing at. So can we do something there? And then like once even if they have these, it's very hard for them to try out the different glasses. Like while you're moving from left to right, you have to keep on changing the lens and see that at some point actually the whole light fills the eye, and even when you move left to right, the reflection is not moving, and that's the optimal point. And getting to that is very hard for them. So it requires a lot of training. So that's where the project started. We wanted to build something that can help them to learn how to use a retinoscope, and also maybe reduce uh, the training required to use such a device. And then we worked and built that auto retinoscopy. So that was completely doctor driven. Smart KC was driven by us. But yeah, but I think we have been working very actively with Sankara. So nowadays, any doctor at Sankara across their 14 branches, if they have any computer science related issues, at times it is like very trivial, but at times it is like very interesting. They reach out to us and then we discuss and figure out if there is a research problem that we both want to work on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I had another question. So you mentioned a few startups in the Indian space who are also looking into such things. So do
Mhm.
so I think again I'm trying to ask such questions to different speakers. So do you have any thoughts on what so again, some of the hidden things which are the a lot of effort which goes behind the scene, like the technology part, I think is one part which seems like we can relate very well to it. But the other
Mhm.
things, let's say the approvals, the multiple rounds of testing. So do you want to shed some light on that? Like what goes beyond taking something from like what you showed as a research paper to something which is a product in India?
Yeah, yeah. I think medical industry is like very, very tricky. Like different countries have different regulation. Like India has the CDSCO approval, which is required. US has the FDA approval, and Europe has the CE approval. And they have like different requirements for different kind of devices. Okay, so for these device manufacturers, they build a device and then they go through a very like different stages of clinical trial. So I think the first stage is fairly easy, where the device is easy to use. It won't harm the eye, it won't harm the operator. So you just have to be within limits and it's fine. But the second style is that like with a small scale people that can actually work well. The clinical three or like phase three trial is the one where they actually do it at a very big demography, where like across age group, across gender, across different races, it can actually perform well. And that's where it they collaborate with a lot of hospitals. They give them these. That in our case, they build like 7 of these devices. They give it to like 3 different hospitals, including LVPI in Hyderabad, Sankara here, and like Arvind Eye Hospital. So they give it to them. They ask them to use it on a regular basis and then report back. So that's like it's like a completely blind study. They are just like taking images and then they compare it with the real like the input from a gold standard medical device and see how well it is performing, and then they report back. So it is a fairly drawn out process to do this. And once you have all of these results with you, then you reach out to a regulatory approval. Let's say like in India, it's CDSCO. So they reach out to them, they submit all the documents, all the results, and then they ask them to give the approval. Then they go through their validation process, seek more information if needed. So yes, I think it's a fairly complex process. The way our thing held, because we were the thought leader, we were not actively working with them in this whole evaluation process, but we were guiding them. So we were very well aware that the stage that they were in, many times they got stuck with something because they were not able to understand the code, or they wanted to do certain changes to the code and they were not able to identify where they should do it. So we told them like, oh, go here, do this, and like, oh, like now you're moving from the Android to iPhone, so you have to put these parameters here and maybe like try this thing out. So I think it was more of like us guiding them, but not actively working on them because again, like there were some restriction on us to work on such a medical device. But yeah, but I think even now, I think we are helping them out in the process. Like the device seems to work well, but in certain cases it fails. So we are like again brainstorming with them like why that happens. So yes, I think it's a continuous process. You need to have like a strong connection with these startups or with somebody else who is willing to take your solution and run with it, because they may not be that familiar with the research aspect and also with your code, because the research code is also not very well written code in most cases. It is slightly hard to understand as well. So yeah, but we are around, we are there to help. So, yeah, and it works out.
Okay, thanks, Mohit. Any other question? Okay, if not, let's thank Mohit.